From the late 70s to his last film in 2016, Oliver Stone was one of Hollywood's most influential filmmakers. Significantly, he was also one of the most political filmmakers ever, making many films about presidents, war, assassinations, coups, and how financial corruption often coincides with political corruption. Some major themes in his films include greed, paranoia, the power of the media, and critiques of American empire and exceptionalism. One scholar wrote that Oliver Stone is in many ways the historian American culture deserves, one compellingly evocative of and appropriate to his time in all his aesthetic excesses, conspiratorial tendencies, and public audacity. So, let's find out more about Oliver Stone. Between 1986 and 2016, Stone directed 18 feature films, 15 of which he wrote, and his oeuvre includes a trilogy of Vietnam films, namely Platoon, Born on the Fourth of July, and Heaven and Earth, which stars Charlie Sheen, Tom Cruise, and Tommy Lee Jones, respectively. Then, Stone also made a trio of presidential films, JFK, Nixon, and W, about George W. Bush, which star Kevin Costner, Anthony Hopkins, and Josh Brolin, respectively. Then, two other films Stone made cover America's financial corruption. These are Wall Street and Wall Street, Money Never Sleeps, which star Charlie Sheen and Michael Douglas in the first, and Michael Douglas and Shia LaBeouf in the second. And the films that bookend Stone's directorial career include films about government corruption, which are Salvador in 1986, starring James Wood, and Snowden in 2016, starring Joseph Gordon-Levitt. In addition to these feature-length documentaries, Stone made 3 documentaries about America's enemies, Fidel Castro in 2004, Hugo Chavez in 2014, and about Vladimir Putin in 2017, all of whom Stone met with, interviewed, sat down with. Hence, as an auteur, he's worked for decades to write and rewrite America's political history. And the genesis for his project all began during his formative years. So, let's talk about his biography. Oliver Stone was born in New York City at the start of the baby boom in 1946 to a French mother and a father who worked as a stockbroker on Wall Street. When he was 16, his parents divorced and his father gained custody, although Oliver spent summers in France with his maternal grandparents. The hard knocks continued for the next 5 years, though, and Stone came of age between JFK's assassination in 1963 and from Stone's discharge from the Vietnam War in 1968 at age 22. While serving for 15 months in Vietnam, Stone was wounded 3 times and awarded the Purple Heart. After leaving military service, he graduated from NYU's film school in 1971 and became a screenwriter at age 25. After several years, he found success writing the script Midnight Express, which later won an Academy Award for Best Adapted Screenplay. But soon, Stone wanted to direct his own films, and the major themes of these films became the betrayal of Vietnam, the corruption of Wall Street, and the culpability of the U.S. government. In retelling the tragic historical events between 1961 and 2016, Stone often tarnished the reputed good guy, took a second look at the quote-unquote bad guy, and questioned official accounts. This perspective came from Stone's sense of betrayal after his service in Vietnam. Consistently, Stone's films condemned the senseless death during the Vietnam War and explored the aftermath of soldiers suffering PTSD. Moreover, many Vietnam vets, including Stone, suffered from a sense of lost innocence, disillusionment against the American government and military leaders, and feeling like men without a country. Many Vietnam vets even felt that their service was a failed sacrifice and a failed war, and their sense of alienation, shame, guilt, self-loathing has all been called a moral injury. Stone's Vietnam trilogy can be read then as a therapeutic meditation on the war, an attempt to make sense of the trauma and grapple with loss of faith in God and country and himself. Those war films rang true for not only himself and other vets, but for audiences broadly and for critics too. And in 1986, Platoon won Best Picture at the Oscars, and Stone won Best Director. In 1989, Stone again won Best Director for Born on the 4th of July, which was also nominated for Best Picture. And being that his only other film to be nominated for Best Picture was JFK, we'll now turn to his presidential films. Oliver Stone's presidential films have explored conspiracy, paranoia, and stupidity in and around the Oval Office. Since President Kennedy was assassinated under murky circumstances during Stone's youth, years later, when the battle-scarred Stone reflected on the assassination, he detected something much more sinister than the lone gunman theory of the official Warren Commission report. From the films JFK and Nixon, Stone's history of Vietnam reads like an American political nightmare, which one scholar has said of Stone's films, quote, "The assassination of John F. Kennedy purged all hope and idealism from the American political landscape and delivered all power into the hands of a covert elite against whom the mythic goodness of the common man and even the most Machiavellian American politician of the 20th century, Richard Nixon, they were all powerless against it. In sum, due to anti-Kennedy sentiment among some Texas oilmen, Cuban nationals, and CIA members after the failed Bay of Pigs invasion, Stone claims that these powerful interests were able to assassinate a sitting U.S. president on American soil, cover it up, and get away with it, due to the absurdity of the magic bullet theory. Thus, for Stone, making JFK was an exercise in cultural countermyth to combat the government's mythic Warren report. While the Nixon film was not as popular as JFK, Anthony Hopkins brilliantly depicted President Nixon becoming more insulated and paranoid and drunk and powerless as Watergate threatened to take him down. According to Stone, the break-in at the Watergate Hotel was committed by the same disaffected CIA agents known as the Plumbers Gang that likely assassinated Kennedy. And then, going a step further, in the film W, Stone depicts President George W. Bush as a bumbling stooge for the Texas oil barons. These barons were descendants of the same oilmen who bankrolled LBJ and may have had JFK shot, and were now depicted as easily manipulating Bush into going for war in the Middle East for oil. So, according to Stone, corrupt oil money was still running the country nearly 50 years after Kennedy's assassination. And although Stone makes some interesting points, his historical revisionism may be a little too simple, with every loose end wrapped up, whereas the truth is sloppy and Stone's historical fiction is just a little too neat. As a stockbroker's son who believed moneyed interests helped assassinate JFK, it's little wonder that Oliver Stone sketched the corruption of the American financial system in his blockbuster Wall Street, and its sequel 23 years later, Wall Street Money Never Sleeps. Like many of Stone's films, Wall Street's protagonists are young, male risk-takers who seek adventure, are prone to violence, eager to prove their manhood to their fathers, think of themselves as martyrs on redemptive quests that often become testosterone-driven obsessions. Moreover, in both Platoon and Wall Street, Stone, who primarily was raised by his father, explores the trope of the good father versus the bad dad. In Platoon, the commander portraying the good father is played by Willem Dafoe, who gets fragged or killed by his own men. It was the evil father figure, played by Tom Berenger, cast against type. The evil father did it. Later, the protagonist, played by Charlie Sheen, got revenge as he in turn fragged Berenger's character, and hence there's a melodrama in the film between father figures, sons, fratricide, and patricide. Turning to Wall Street, in the original, Charlie Sheen is again the protagonist, and this time he's caught between his work mentor, the hedonistic Gordon Gekko, played by Michael Douglas, and his down to earth union official father, played by Martin Sheen, who happens to be Charlie Sheen's real life father. And as an aside, Martin Sheen played a role in Apocalypse Now that's very similar to Charlie Sheen's role in Platoon. Both in Platoon and in Wall Street, rogue actors take down corrupt leaders, and as one scholar has argued, perhaps Stone's career after Vietnam has been steered by an informal motto, something like, "Hope is the foundation for action against the American empire." Well, that same message resonates through Stone's last feature film, Snowden, which chronicled Edward Snowden's fight against and flight from the National Security Administration in the US, or the NSA. In Stone's depiction, Snowden was trying to show Americans the vast surveillance apparatus that was being used to spy not only on suspected terrorists and foreign assets, but also on everyday Americans. Therefore, from Salvador in 1986 to Snowden in 2016, Oliver Stone's films have questioned official narratives, dealt with the disillusionment of political turmoil, the betrayal of war, and the greed of Wall Street. It seems Stone suffered a severe moral injury during his Vietnam service, making him deeply suspicious of the military, the government, and the financial system that his father helped build as an influential figure with Lehman Brothers. Notably, Lehman Brothers went bankrupt in 2008 during the recession, immediately before the sequel, Wall Street, Money Never Sleeps, went into production. And although Oliver Stone never supported Donald Trump for president, they are contemporaries. They're the same age, born just a couple months apart. They both had European mothers. They both grew up in New York City, where they actually knew each other socially a little bit. And both Stone and Trump lived through the same generational marking events, such as JFK's assassination, the moon landing, Vietnam, Watergate, and the Iranian Revolution. There was even a deleted scene from Wall Street Money Never Sleeps that had Donald Trump in it. So, we may better understand the suspicion toward authority and the inclination toward conspiratorial thinking of the baby boomer generation, including Trump, if we carefully watch Stone's films. While Stone and Trump draw different conclusions about Wall Street and American empire and American exceptionalism and these other themes, they may be two sides of one coin, and as a mirror reflection, both reveals similarities and imperfections. Comparing Stone and Trump's worldview crystallizes how formative the Vietnam era was for older baby boomers. In summary, as one scholar aptly wrote of Oliver Stone, it's particularly ironic that the history of this country is popularly written in part by Oliver Stone, a veteran of an unpopular war whose historical viewpoint was shaped dramatically by the fact that this country sent him to fight for misguided reasons and cared little whether he lived or died. Yes, it sure is food for thought.